Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. My name is Darren Howell. Thank you all for joining us today for the first of 4 listening sessions by the Boston Police Task Force. Before we get into the session, we would like to go over the different language options available for this meeting and how you all can participate. We will then introduce ourselves, the charge of the task force of today's listening session, and then turn it over to hear your feedback. Can the interpreters please introduce themselves in the order that I call? Please, interpreter, introduce themselves. Yes, can the Vietnamese interpreter introduce themselves?
Hi.
Hello. Hi, my name is Carolina Lee. I am a Vietnamese interpreter.
Thank you, thank you. Can the Spanish interpreter please introduce
Hello. Hello, another Vietnamese interpreter. My name is Linh Nguyen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can the Spanish interpreter introduce themselves?
Hola, mi nombre es Erika Pérez, soy una de las intérpretes de español. Si necesita el audio en español, por favor, llamar al 1-617-675-4444 y el código es 728-297-573-1854.
Don't go on your phone. Text, use your computer.
Please, everyone mute your phone. You're being called to speak. Can the Haitian Creole interpreter introduce themselves? Can the interpreter for himself? Yes, can hear you now, please.
Oui, alors bonsoir, nom c'est Samuel Melus, c'est moi-même qui n'a participé dans Boston Police Task Force et pour participer dans ça, ou besoin pour attendre en créole, ou qu'à composer numéro ça, baisser volume laptop là et puis composer 617 674 675 44 44, encore 617 675 44 44. Donc code accès pour participer, code accès c'est 453 179 259 92 11, encore 453 179 259 92 11 et puis après ça on peut c'est pound.
Thank you. Interpreter for Mandarin, introduce themselves.
Okay, hi, my name is Wei. I will be your Mandarin interpreter today. 你好，我是今天这个警局的这个讨论的一个中文翻译啊。如果你需要中文翻译的话，请拨打617-675-4444，然后到时候加入密码是185-386-240-5224，井号键。好，再说一遍，请拨打617-675-4444，然后输入密码185-386-240-5224，然后是井号键。好，谢谢。
Thank you. Can the Cantonese interpreter introduce themselves?
Hi, good afternoon. Melissa and Anna will be your Cantonese interpreter for today. 大家好 ，Melissa 同我將會為你提供廣東話翻譯。如果你需要廣東話翻譯嘅話，請打呢個電話617-675-4444。重申一次，電話係617-675-4444，輸入密碼720-950-146-2457。一個井字，重申一次720-590-146-2475，一個井字。唔該晒 ，Thank you.
Thank you. And can we have our Cape Verde and Creole interpreter introduce themselves? Cape Verde and Creole. One more time. Maybe it's the mute button. Cape Verde and Creole interpreter.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Eve. I'm Cape Verde Creole interpreter. Hello, meu nome é Eva Rosa, minha intérprete cabo-verdiano. Nós estamos bem fazer aquele evento ali. Por liga no número 1617-675-4444 e código de que acesso ali é 548-211-9733
Thank you all, and
Oh, we
hopefully everyone was able.
to introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Michelle. Hello?
Yeah. So, I believe all the interpreters have introduced themselves in the native language, and want to make sure that folks, thank you. Want to make sure that folks are aware that we will be having live captioning, will be streamed simultaneous as a split screen to the session. The ASL stream of this meeting can be accessed via the Zoom app, Zoom platform. The meeting ID number is 964-5353-6839. Once again, the meeting ID number, and for those that's viewing, is 964-5353-6839, and the passcode is 151195. Again, this is for the ASL interpreter services. It will be streamed simultaneous using the Zoom platform at the information provided on the screen. Everyone joining this event as an attendee will have their microphone muted, and you will not have the ability to turn your camera on. One, if you are joining on a computer device, at the bottom of your screen, you have a menu that has different icons. The microphone will be grayed out since you are muted as an attendee. If you can't hear, two, if you can't hear, please click the phone icon and check to make sure your audio connection is set to speaker and microphone. 3, when your name is called to testify, please raise your hand by clicking the more icon, which is illustrated by 3 dots, then click the raise hand icon. Once your testimony is done, please click the same icon to lower your hand. I would like to say that again just to help with the flow of conversation. Once your testimony is done, please click the same icon to lower your hand. If you are joining by phone, please press *3 to raise your hand. You will hear 2 beeps when you are taken off of mute. At that point, you can begin your spoken testimony. 4, please keep in mind that this meeting is being recorded and testimony will be shared with the task force. We encourage you to continue submitting written comments via the Google form on the boston.gov /ending-racism website until August 7th. To ensure all opinions are heard and respected, the decorum for these list sessions are as follows. 1, we ask that you engage respectfully at all times. Disruptive behavior will not be permissible. 2, priority for spoken testimony will go to those who signed up 24 hours in advance via bit.ly/BPD form, Google form. After everyone who signed up in advance has provided their spoken testimony, the public listening session will open up for comments for as long as time permits. The host will unmute attendees who raise their hands to speak on a first-come basis. 3, when it's your turn to testify, you will be unmuted by the host. 4, spoken testimony will be limited to 2 minutes per person at the discretion of the task force. Your thoughts. We encourage you to submit additional written testimony via bit.ly/BPD form. 5, please be mindful of the pace of your spoken testimony so that it's clear for the interpreters. 6, again, these listening sessions will be recorded and transcripts will be made available to the task force. We now will begin our listening session by introducing ourselves, the charge of the task force, and the specific topic of today's listening session. So my name is Darren Howell. I am the president and co-founder of Drive Boston Community Resources and political coordinator for 1199 SCIU. I am one of 3 members that's on this subcommittee's task force. Any other task members present today?
I'm Jacob Brown, Hope Baptist Church. I'm associate pastor there, and I run an organization called My City at Peace.
Thank you. Not just for the subcommittee, but the large task force.
Clerk.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Dennis White.
Jamal Crawford, activist.
Hello?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, hi, I'm Allison Cartwright. I am the attorney in charge of the Roxbury Defenders. And I'm on the subcommittee for body worn camera.
Task members? They are part of the subcommittee for the topic that we will be discussing today, which is body worn camera policy. The charge has been tasked with is review of force policies, engage community by or apologize. Report overview. Report. That we've been tasked with, so right now we're engaged. Network. And then some questions that we are looking to gather feedback from so that we can take that information and review it to make the recommendations, with making sure that we have community input. Talk about is the history. How did we get here? In 2014, the Body Worn Camera Initiative was introduced by Saigon and Jakir Scott following the fatal shooting of Michael Brown. They set forth to create BCAP, which is the Boston Police Camera Action Team. In 2015, after several hearings was done with the Boston City Council, it was a pilot program agreed to. Unfortunately, that program was delayed due to court review that the Boston Police Patrolman Association initiated, the union for the Boston Police, as it related to the program. But unfortunately, in 2016, the one-year pilot program was initiated, where originally there was actually be officer volunteer to review video prior to the report, and does not allow for after the report. It allowed subjects of recording or next of kin access to the footage, all others through public records requests, and also calls for 6 months retention of video, 3 years if flagged by subject officer or supervisor.
To show that slide.
Yes. Can you do the next slide, please? So these were the policy that was proposed from BCAP that I just highlighted. Give you a few seconds to just read it for the visual learners. And then we went on to the next slide where there was consensus on the pilot program. So the consensus was that there will facial recognition software was not allowed. Body cameras only recorded specific incidents. Officers must obtain consent to enter your home. Body cameras could not be used to record private interaction between officers. Officers must notify you when they are recording, and body cameras will not record instances with confidential informants or undercover officers. So that was the pilot program that went on for a year. In 2000, this is post-pilot program. In 2018, Mayor Walsh proposed $2 million as a phase-in approach to fully equipped BPD officers. Rule 405 was established June 3rd, 2019, which was on camera policy. This superseded any prior documents on this subject. In 2020, Mayor Walsh convened the Boston Police Reform Task Force to address areas of police reforms, responding to the national cries. The subcommittee for body cameras were identified. Reverend Jeffrey Brown, Allison Cartwright, and myself, Darren Howell. As a subcommittee, we met with Shakia Smith, Segon Idiwa, and Rashawn Hall from the ACLU to get a better understanding of the history, outcome, and ongoing concerns and issues. And where we are at now is wanting to get your feedback on some of the areas with the questions that's on the next slide. Usage. When should which officers should be assigned to wear body-worn cameras? When should body-worn cameras start recording? Under what conditions are body-worn cameras allowed to be turned off? Access. Who has access to that footage? How long does access to video footage take? How are people's privacy rights protected? And disciplinary actions. What disciplinary actions are taken if an officer violates body-worn camera policy? Does current disciplinary actions deter others from violating? So that is a history and content of how we got here to this conversation. And in response, now I want to turn it over to the community to provide reactions and feedback, unless there's any other members from the subcommittee that would like to weigh in.
Doing an excellent job, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Brown. Allison, any words?
Nothing. You're doing fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll turn it over to the community for feedback. So if you are interested in providing testimony, please click the more option to raise your hand.
Stephen Buckley, you had signed up to testify.
Stephen Buckley, you're alive.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, my name's Steve Buckley. I'm actually a public participation consultant, and I just wanted to make a few comments and on the presentation today, the format, not on the substance itself. One of the things that might be improved for the subsequent sessions is that the material that was just presented be provided ahead of time, so people aren't scrambling to read what was just presented, and be able to think about it for more than a minute. So that's one suggestion there. The other thing is that I would suggest that anybody who is interested in core values for public participation can visit the website for the International Association for Public Participation. And this wouldn't actually, well, it's feedback now because you've shown something, but feedback is based on something that already exists. And since you just showed it, it's technically feedback. But if you hadn't shown that, it would have just been input. So some people use those terms interchangeably, and they're not exactly the same. I just wanted to point that out. Other than that, I appreciate your making this available and using the technology so that more people can participate in a meaningful way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Steve. Next person.
Casson Quinlan, you are unmuted.
Oh, heavens, I didn't know. I signed up to speak tomorrow. I'm all for the body cameras. Okay, I'll say one thing as long as I'm unmuted. I know I've worked in healthcare for many years. I took care of my brother who had brain injury. And what I found is that when people record incidents, when they write them down, when the staff write them down, they write them from their own perspective. You know, this is what happened. I told him this. He didn't do that. Then he did such and such. And it all comes out. And when you read the thing later, it comes out to be something that is very damning. And it shows exactly where the person did wrong. Because I had a closer view of my brother, I understood that there was a misunderstanding that he didn't understand in the process. And two people talked to him at the same time. Somebody else told the other one. I had a whole different perspective of where he was completely lost in the whole process. And so it really matters to have the body cameras because it's just an alternative way of keeping track of what happened, because otherwise it's very easy to skew something by your own interpretation of what happened when you really only saw a partial view. So that's off the cuff. There you go. Nice to see everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment.
I don't hear anybody.
So want to remind people that either raise your hand by clicking the more options, or if you are on the phone and would like to speak, click *3. Just to, I'll say it, I don't want the awkward silence as much as possible, but this is a listening session, so I'm here to listen as a task force member. But also, if there's any feedback or any questions or things that we should be taking into consideration as we're reviewing this, please don't hesitate to share that too, if that is something that we should be looking out for. One thing I enjoy about technology, I can see there's 65 people on, so I know that somebody has some comments or concerns or questions as it relates to this issue.
If no one's going to say nothing in the interim, I'll say that. I just want folks to know that all of this is on the City of Boston's website. So one thing that could be helpful for the general public and everybody, let's spread this far and wide. This is the first meeting, the first time we're gathering. Let's spread it far and wide. The more people who know, all the information is there, how to submit your testimony early, how to call in, how to participate, submit your testimony before or after, translations. Let's share that far and wide.
Thank you, Jamal.
We'll also give an opportunity to speak for any of the folks calling in. So I'm going to start unmuting one by one and just asking that caller if they would like to take the opportunity to provide any feedback.
Thank you.
Caller number 8, you are unmuted. Caller number 8, you are unmuted if you would like to share your feedback.
I'd like to just acknowledge that Councilor at-large Anissa Sabi George has joined in as a listener. Thank you for joining. And as Jamal highlighted, please feel free to visit the website if you feel more comfortable submitting testimony via electronically versus verbally communicating it. We definitely are looking for community feedback, questions, better clarity if that's what's necessary, so that we can make sure that this is a very transparent process that involves community input. And just to make sure I'm clear, I apologize. The raise hand is under the more option. So you would have to click on the ... icon. And then once you click on that, the option to raise your hand will be available and you can speak.
The next caller has also been unmuted if you would like to give your feedback.
I hope Cassie doesn't mind, but she just shared a comment in the chat. Someone will probably say that today is different from 2014 because so many people have cameras and we are much more accustomed to viewing incidents that go down. It is good to have a police body cam view also. I find it difficult to hear people speaking.
A comment before that too. Somebody suggested also that in Colorado, just the act of fearing or turning off a body camera is considered, you know, a bad act in and of itself by default. And so they want a clarification on if that's included in our stuff as well.
Thank you for whoever mentioned that comment. We will definitely take all feedback that we're hearing, either through someone talking or through the information in the chat, so that we can come up with our recommendations for reform efforts. So please, whatever comes to mind, whatever you have observed that takes place in other places that you're wondering if it can be applied here, all is fair game right now. We want as much information as possible, because we are on a short window of time and we want to put the best recommendations forward based upon what information is gathered.
Also unmuted Elena, who is putting information in the chat. Elena, if you can speak directly to the task force.
Hi. That was me. That was my question. Just if there's support for, or how would we implement this, where it's kind of assumed to be that the officer is acting badly, like the worst is kind of assumed of the officer, almost that kind of attitude, if the body cam is obstructed in any way or turned off. And I would have a follow-up too. Is there thought in how to integrate these body-worn cameras with this concept of data availability, which has been a huge topic, right? Like Boston Police actually, I say this because my field is data science, has very little data availability. So will data availability and publicizing of this data be a part of body cam implementation? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Eleni. These are definitely the type of comments and suggestions we want to receive so that we can make these recommendations, or at least explore these scenarios as we're on the task force. So please, that was exactly right. I noticed that one of the task force members has also joined us. Do you want to introduce yourself, Joe?
Well, thank you very much, Darren, and thank you for this session. This is Joseph Feaster. I'm one of the task force members. I am the chairman of the board at Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. I don't think my face is showing up here, but that's not by my doing. And I just hope that people will participate and give us some of their insights. That's what this session is for. So, and thank you for this hosting this session today, Darren.
Thank you, Joe, for joining. Any other comments, feedback, suggestions, questions, things that we as task force members should be looking into? As you are aware, there's several that's on right now, so please feel free to leave questions, comments, suggestions, so that we can gather as much information to before we make recommendations for the reform efforts. I'm glad some of the questions that have came to mind for consideration is some of the questions that for those that's viewing can see on the screen. Which officers are assigned to wear body-worn cameras? These are the type of questions that have came up throughout the conversations that we've had internally, but if there's additional questions that we should be looking at or exploring, please don't hesitate to share that information as well.
Megan Lucy is also unmuted in case you want to ask the questions that you asked to the host.
Sure. I'm curious. Is the body cam overtime and protest exemption still in place? And if so, why are these in place? And second, is there a way to make body cam footage easier to access for the public? There's a history in other cities such as Chicago of police departments and attorney general's offices withholding body cam videos from the public and from court processes.
Thank you for those questions. Those are definitely the type of questions that we are, I believe, committed to finding answers out within this task force body.
I would just like to encourage everybody. We realize too, a lot of this, you know, you say a statement or what have you in this process, please take advantage of the technology that is available. I encourage anybody to write down some of their thoughts on key points and submit that via the Google form and every other means available. Google form, the email, however you get it to us, please.
And also, if there's any concerns around body-worn cameras that people want us to be mindful of, please don't hesitate to share that information as well. And maybe this might be helpful. Do people have any concerns as it relates to privacy?
Cassie, you are if you want to just verbalize the question that you put in the chat.
Okay, well, it just seems to me that the video is very useful as training material. I've worked in human services over many, many years, and I learned gradually to get better at dealing with people. It doesn't happen instantly. 1 minute you're good, and the next minute you read something and you're lousy or whatever. It was a learning process, and having that video is enormously helpful to kind of for the officers involved for training, so they can see, okay, what did I miss? Were there other resources around? So that the next time you're kind of watching out for those things. It's a wonderful, if Belichick can do it and watch all the Monday morning football replay of the games, it's a good idea for the officers to have those things as resources to help them, get better at their jobs, just like all professionals.
So, Cassie, I just want to make sure I heard you correct. So you're saying that
Darren, this is Joseph Feaster. Could I posit a question that people might want to respond to?
Of course, of course.
I know during our deliberations, it has come up the question of privacy, and I wanted our listening participants to know that the procedure is that the person or a person can ask that the camera be turned off in many situations. The question I want to posit for comment by some of the persons who are participating here is, what are their views? Should there be instances that a citizen can ask that the camera be turned off and it must be turned off, or should the whole interaction be recorded?
Great question, Joe. Thank you. Any reactions on the phone or online to that? What Joe Fisa just highlighted around privacy and recording?
Latoya, you are unmuted.
Latoya?
Latoya Gale, you are unmuted.
Am I muted?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was saying, my opinion is that I think all officers should be required to wear cameras and that they should be activated during almost all interactions with civilians. And if a civilian asks for it to be activated, they should be activated. I think it's going to be, I think as far as privacy, maybe that should be handled on the other end about how that footage is shared after the fact. Like maybe if there was children involved or something else that after the fact, a civilian says, I would rather this not be public or people be blurred out or something. But I think that, in my opinion, that safety instance and we can there should be something in place that tests are used after the fact, but let's just have it.
Darren, can I just ask Latoya a question because it wasn't, she had said activated. Latoya, are you saying that a citizen should not have the right to say that they do not want to be filmed under any circumstance? Okay.
Well, I think I think yes, you shouldn't be able to say I don't want to be filmed, just because I think it's gonna be it'll start to be sticky about, well, a cop can say, well, they filmed them, or I think have the camera on.
Okay, thank you.
Other reactions? And I know I put in the chat, Cassie, if you can leave the question that you asked verbally, if you can leave it also in the chat or on the Google form as Jamal highlighted, so we can make sure that we have that information to review as a task force.
Cassie, you're also muted if you would like to just verbalize that question.
I'm just confused. To me, it's there's different purposes for it, but the main purpose for the cameras could be useful in terms of self-training, professional training. You know, for the officers to review their own instance, and then if they want to show it as a training for other officers, then maybe they have to get permission of the people involved. I'm not quite sure how that goes with the privacy. You know, whether you lock people out, but I mean, is that useful? Is they going to use these cameras for training? I mean, you know, for discrepancies, you think you saw one thing and you realize you could have done something else.
Thank you for that, Cassie. I think that we will definitely have that as a point of discussion as it relates to how is the footage being used, not only internally, but externally. Stephen?
Thank you for letting me know. I kind of have to go in the middle of a meeting, but I'll totally check it out.
All right, somebody's not on mute, but can we get Stephen Buckley off mute? His hand's raised.
Stephen, you are able to speak.
Thanks. Along those same lines about, is there any way to determine whether or not the body cam's, like, is there a red blinking light so that a citizen will know whether it's working or not working? And then if it's not working, then you can say, I'd like this to be recorded, please. Or, you know, is it, you know, a red blinking light, or is there any indication that tells a citizen the status?
I think that's definitely something that we need to look into. Is there some type of physical indication to let someone know whether or not the camera is on or recording? Is that what that capture your question, Stephen?
Hey, Mr. White maybe can answer that. It seems pretty straightforward.
Well, actually, this is a listening session.
Right, and since there was a presentation, this should have been followed by clarification questions before the hearing. So just point that out. So people are puzzled, you can clear it up with a clarification, not a debate, if you want. Thank you.
So it sounds like, and again, Stephen, I know you're not muted. You have a straight question. I just want to highlight what Allison said was around, we're here to listen, but if that's a question that you want an immediate response to, I know Dennis White wasn't here to be more of a back and forth interaction, but more of less as an observer and listener, that we would take any questions, any comments, any feedback back to our task force circle to flush out and review. But if Superintendent White wants to answer the question around, is there any physical indicator to let a person know that a camera is on and recording versus not, like a blinking light as Stephen highlighted?
Yes, sorry about that, Steve. I just want to double check my clarification on my answer. So there is a light on the top, but it's more facing up for the officer. And every 2 minutes, there is a beeping sound. So that's something that the task force, maybe we can look at about possibly putting the light in the front so that it's more visible. But there is a light on the top of the camera. If that answers your question, sir.
So unmute Stephen just to make sure that we've got clarity to his question.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Thank you for that clarification. Now I can comment, since I understand more properly the situation, that yes, I would recommend that there must be a model. I'm guessing there's a model out there somewhere that points forward and lets the subject or the person in front of the camera also know that it's working properly. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Superintendent White, as well. And again, any other questions, or again, not to any particular task member, but things that we should be looking at as a task force that we can review, because the recommendations are going to come from the feedback and comments and questions that we're hearing during these listening sessions. So just want to reiterate that the task force is here to listen. I'm trying to keep the conversation going just for not too much dead air, but hopefully I'm not sharing my personal views.
So we've unmuted Megan Lucy, who put a question to the host. Megan, if you just want to ask your question.
Sure, and also just to comment on the discussion that was just had about like whether the subject can tell if he or she is being video cameraed. Alternatively, like if some sort of verbal indication by the officer to like note that this is being filmed, like you should be aware if there is not like a model that does show the subject, that might be something that would be useful in the process. And back to a previous question about when video would be inappropriate to share with the public, perhaps when actions involve children, any identifying data and images should not be available to the public to see. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Megan.
Chad, you're unmuted.
Oh, Cassie, unmuted.
Chad Fletcher, who had his raised hand.
Hey, before Pat, you come on, can the folks that have raised their hand put their hand down so that we're not getting confused if you have a second question? Pat.
Hello?
Yep, you have the floor. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So several questions that I have as I've been listening and I looked at the slides you guys presented. I want to know how much of the recently passed budget goes towards the purchase and and officers being trained on body cameras. How much, like, if you, I mean, that's my first question. I might as well just get them out. So yeah, that's
Take them all, because you're not probably going to get an answer. We just want all these questions to be able to bring back for feedback as well.
All right, sorry. My first question is, how much of the recently passed budget goes towards body cameras? How much for how long are officers trained on the way they need to be used? and even after, you know, let's say I mean, I hope this doesn't happen, but if we had another George Floyd type of situation here in the city, you know, and it requires, you know, people look at, you know, body cam footage, I mean, in the courts as well, and it's also available to the public, like after the, you know, after the situation is resolved, I mean, does that body cam footage remain available to the public or anyone else? Those are my questions.
Thank you. So I know the last question that you asked, I believe the first question was around the finances, like what is this all going to cost budget-wise? And then the next one alluded to how long the footage stays available.
Yes.
Yep. So that's part of this consideration is who has access to the footage, how long does that footage stay accessible? Those are definitely right in line to some of the questions that have been raised as well internally. Thank you, Chad. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, reactions? I do want to highlight, Elena mentioned that as a task force, you need to also release a statement of exactly where your biases and motivations are coming from. Wanted to throw that out there. I do want to, as we're, I'll do it in 10 minutes. It's around just making sure anyone that joined in the halfway marker, some of the things that we covered in the beginning, we'd like to make sure it's reiterated at 4 o'clock. So at 4 o'clock, we will take a brief pause to go over some of the things that we discussed in the very beginning. I also was informed that the questions that are being asked by the community are being noted, and we are looking to, the city will be looking to make sure that the answers are provided publicly. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask so that folks don't feel that this conversation just ended here. It's to help us move forward with the reform recommendations that we will be having. But I know there's specific questions that are being asked that are being recorded so that those individual questions can be answered on a public website.
Want to ask your question?
Your phone, unless that's the first piece.
Cassie Quinlan, who put a comment to the chat, if you would like to ask it.
Well, I just think that they should put a little more emphasis on that training for police officers, because the questions about privacy and whether the money for these things, I mean, the question of how they're used, I like the way he said both internally used and externally used. And where so many of the public are questioning the police, it's nice if they tell us more about the internally used. The question, the only other thing is too, like about the discipline. I don't know what discipline could be added other than noting down that the person who wasn't using their camera. To me, that's to be determined what kind of discipline. You know, that could also come from recommendations of the officers themselves. I mean, you know, being involved in deciding, you know, hopefully they like the cameras after a while.
So much for that, Cassie. Chad, it looks like your hand is up, or Chad, did you have a question? Let's unmute Chad.
Oh, no, can you wait a minute? Can you see me?
No, I can see your hand was raised. I don't know if if folks don't put their hand down after they comment, then
No. I didn't have another question. I did not. I might, now that you mention it. No, I'm sorry, let me put my hand down for now.
no problem. We're living in a digital age. And again, Cassie, to your comment around discipline, that's where one of the questions, as you can see on the consideration, if you're looking on your screen, does the current disciplinary actions deter others from violating said policy around body-worn camera? That was one of the questions that we had when it comes to disciplinary actions. So thank you for your comment as well.
If I may, for those of you who brought up the issue of discipline, what, if any, discipline actions would you recommend, or what are your thoughts as to discipline, regardless of what's currently in the policy?
Thank you so much for that question, Allison. I think that is something definitely we would like to hear feedback and reactions to. What should be the disciplinary measures? What should be the consequences for violation of this policy? Any suggestions, thoughts around that? All right, I'm going to give folks some time to think about that question around what should be maybe a consequence for violating any of the policy as it relates to body-worn camera, whether it's turned off, whether it's improperly used, what potential disciplinary action should be taken. But before anybody weighs in on that, I want to just do something now that we're midway into this listening session, is remind people that we do have various interpreter services available. So I want to go through and introduce, have the interpreters introduce themselves for the folks that might have joined midway after the introductions. So can the Vietnamese interpreter introduce themselves again?
Hi, my name is Vietnamese interpreter. Tôi tên là Linh Nguyễn. Tôi là thông dịch viên bằng tiếng Việt, sẽ giúp cho quý vị để hiểu những thông tin ngày hôm nay là buổi lắng nghe về ban công tác của ở Boston. Và bài hôm nay nói về phải làm thế nào và như thế nào và huấn luyện cách mang máy hình trên người. Cảm ơn nhiều. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have now the Spanish interpreter?
Sí, mi nombre es Erika Pérez, soy la intérprete de español. Si necesita el audio en español, apague el volumen para este evento importante y llame al 1-617-675-4444 y luego entre el código de acceso, el 728-297-573-1854 y el símbolo de signo. Thank you.
Thank you. Haitian Creole interpreter.
Bonsoir, mon pap, c'est Samuel Milus, c'est moi qui interprète pour créole haïtien, ou besoin audio créole haïtien, et tel volume 1 dans l'événement principal ça, et puis relais 617 675 44 44, encore numéro c'est 617 675 44 44, et puis code accès, c'est 453 179 259 92 11. Encore 453 179 259 92 11, et puis après ça, on précise pas.
Thank you. Can we get now and Mandarin interpreter.
好啊，你好啊，我是你的普通话翻译啊，我们是。然后，如果你想要参与到我们今天的这个听证会里面，请你拨打617-675-4444，然后输入密码185-386-240-524-5224，按井号键结束。啊，再说一遍，请拨打617-675-4444，然后输入密码185-386-240-5224，井号键结束。好，谢谢。
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can we now have the Cantonese interpreter introduce themselves?
Good afternoon, Melissa and Anna will be your Cantonese interpreter. 大家好 ，Melissa 同 Anna 將會為你提供廣東話翻譯。如果你需要翻譯嘅話，請打617-675-4444。重申一次617-675-4444。請輸入密碼720-950-146-2475井字。重申一次720-590-146-2475。Thank you， 多謝。
Thank you. And can we have the Cape Verdean Creole interpreter?
Queria Rochelle Cueva, e nós interpreta cabo-verdiana, se nós mestre áudio na crioulo cabo-verdiano, nós podemos chamar para 617-675-4444, código de acesso é 548-211-110-97-33, depois calca na asterístico de lado direito no teclado numérico. Obrigado.
Thank you to you all. I also want to make sure that folks are aware that there is ASL streaming simultaneously as a split screen to the session. The ASL stream of this meeting is on the Zoom platform. The meeting ID number is 964-5353-6839. Passcode 151195. Once again, the meeting ID for ASL interpreter services, which will be streaming simultaneously on the Zoom platform, is available. The meeting ID number is 964-5353-6839. Passcode 151195. So I want to pick up where we left off. One of the comments, one of the questions that subcommittee member Allison put forward to the folks listening and on the session is, what should the disciplinary measures be for someone that violates the body-worn camera policy? Has anyone have any reaction to that or any suggestion? Chad. Someone unmute Chad Fletcher.
Good. So now I have this information. All right. Follow up with what Baker had proposed about having the certification and decertification process. I think one of the consequences should be decertification of any officer that violates this policy. If not decertification, I would also recommend there be some sort of fine or a dock in the officer's pay. I do have another question that I wanted to ask. Have any of the officers that were part of the pilot program, I'm sure, have they offered any feedback, or do you have access to that feedback for going back 3-4 years?
One thing that was done was that after the pilot program, there was a study that was commenced. So yes, we should be able to have access to the study that was done to find out what findings. I believe those findings is what led to the current policy that's in place that was signed. But yes, we need to get that information as well and see if we can make that information public.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Claire Barker, you're unmuted if you want to ask your question that you asked in the chat.
Thank you. Yes, and I've collected a couple of more. So my first question is, what violations of the BWC policies have been reported since the pilot, and how are they currently handled?
That is definitely a great question.
And then shall I go ahead with my next other questions?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. Are there any data from the body cameras that show interactions between police and citizens collected, broken down by gender, race, and age? And what do those show? Let's see. I think that's all for me for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this session too.
Thank you for participating. And also, please be aware, CART live captioning is available to attendees. Please click on the multimedia page that appears on the split screen. Just wanted to put that message out there. Elena, would you like to share your chat comment in regards to immediate firing with no ability to just be hired by the force one county over?
Nope, that's pretty much it. Part of the data availability of this that would be helpful for that is knowing which specific officers had any sort of thing filed against them. There was just a report by the Boston Globe that there's really no disciplinary actions that have been taken to police following through complaints. And I think that, yeah, rehiring of police by other forces and how all of this data gets lost is a major issue.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any other comments, reactions, especially around the disciplinary conversation? Chad, I don't want to assume your hand is up because you have another comment, but I do want to make sure I do not, that I do notice that the hand is up. Thank you, Jamal. Jamal just put in the chat the actual final body cam pilot report from 2018. And I know I asked this question earlier, but wanted to see if there was a different reaction given some of the comments around disciplinary and footage. Privacy. What is people's reaction to the privacy? Whether it's of a person that's subject of the incident or if it's someone in the background, you know, what's people's reactions, thoughts as it relates to camera recording and people's privacy rights? So I just want to highlight that Cassie mentioned if an officer is willfully refusing to wear the body worn camera, it should be an issue for HR, needs to be worked out, or else should impact the recertification process. Thank you.
Cassie, you're unmuted if you need to add anything else.
No, thank you.
And again, I want to mention for those that might have joined later, that there is a Google form that folks can fill out their comments, testimonies, suggestions, recommendations that we should be reviewing as we're discussing what reform we will be advocating for as a task force. So please do not hesitate to share all comments, all suggestions, all questions, so that we can make sure that we're gauging from a larger lens than just our own.
I have a suggestion from a task force member, and that is quite simply that in the future we need to consider a lot of these, because what's coming up here that I'm seeing is a lot of these are comments kind of with questions that, just like when Superintendent White was able to answer what's a very simple question, that might also help us move along, because the question that Ms. Cassie just brought up, if an officer is willfully refusing to wear the body-worn camera, like, I don't know that that can happen. No different than an officer shows up to work and says, I don't feel like wearing my badge today. Or, if it's issued, it's issued. The issues may be if it was turned on, or if they even have, so we need to drill down, I think, on some of the parameters and the things so that we stay in the realm of what is really possible or probable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Darren, can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up about and see if anyone in the audience might want to add to the question that was asked earlier as to when, under what circumstances should the footage from the body cameras be limited to the public? I know that one individual mentioned children, and I wanted to hear if the residents of this great city of ours have any other thoughts on that.
All right, I'm gonna think that Chad's hand actually is up now. Can someone unmute Chad? Chad?
Okay. Yep. Thank you for muting me. So yeah, I would to follow up with what Marie said. How will the city of Boston and how will you as a task force determine what a violation of the BWC policy is and what isn't a violation of the body-worn camera policies?
I'd love some suggestions. I mean, I think it would be great to get some feedback and some input from the community about what some of the parameters that they're thinking about, so that at least we have that in our minds as we make that analysis. Any thoughts, Chad?
Well, I definitely think that the body-worn cameras should be on in areas that may be known for being over-policed. That's one. Let's see, other potential violations of the policy. Yes, I mean willfully turning it off if they're going to detain someone, especially if it's someone that may have a criminal record. I'm thinking of other potential violations of it. I know there's other people that might be thinking at the same time as me. So maybe if you give me a minute or two, I'll have some other suggestions on what to me makes up a violation.
Thank you.
FG, you are also unmuted.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to address the last question in regards to when footage would be made available to members of the community. I don't agree that only videos of children wouldn't be made available, only because we do understand that people under the age of 18, particularly people of color, are still policed at a much higher rate than others, and they're also seen as older than they are. So I would say that regardless of somebody's age, there still should be a level of accessibility for the community, because there's kids that are 13, 14 years old that are still getting policed a lot worse because of the color of their skin. So I would just advocate that not be something that limits our ability to kind of review footage from police officers. That's all.
Thank you. FG. You're unmuted.
I just spoke.
Oh, okay. Can you put your hand down? I apologize.
Thank you.
And again, I want to reiterate that the questions that are being asked the answers will be made public. I just want to reiterate that some of the questions that have been asked that have not been answered, those answers will be made public. The questions are being recorded. I have somebody that's not technically on this call, but they're in the room with me as a citizen. So they have been listening in as well. They chimed in by saying folks that are under WITSAC, people that have been relocated and they're concerned about, their face or location being identified. So I didn't want that not to be mentioned in this conversation since it was made by a resident of the city of Boston.
We're going to unmute Graciela so you can ask the question that you posted to the host.
Yeah, sure. So Graciela, and my question was about the problems with the Minneapolis version of body cameras that still allowed George Floyd to be killed while the body cameras were on. So I was just wondering how we would be planning to address those shortcomings, and then also how this program would be funded, and if we could consider using funds that currently go toward military grade weapons for police.
Can you say a little bit more about shortcomings?
Yeah, so whatever allowed George Floyd to be killed while body cameras were still in use, I was just wondering how we would prevent that from happening with our program.
I know, again, there is things I know. I like Cassie on here. She said we want the cameras rolling. Just want to make sure that we're highlighting some of the comments that's being made in the chat too. And I think there was a follow-up answer to the same question that you asked Reverend Brown about what the shortcomings of cameras of when George Floyd died. Any other reactions, comments, suggestions, questions, things that we need to be taken into consideration as we're looking to, create these recommendations for reforms? I think all this information is extremely helpful as we're thinking about these areas to make sure that the best recommendation is put forward to Mayor Marty Walsh. Stephen.
Yeah, Steve Buckley. I know in 2015, President Obama's task force on 21st century policing came out. And anyway, I was wondering if the task force was the Boston task force was going to be referring to that as far as things like what's best practices for body cams, like the previous speaker was alluding to Minneapolis. So, or maybe there was that a poor practice? Was that a bad practice? As far as what the police community is doing, not just on body cameras, but on police oversight and so forth. So I was just wondering if that's my comment, I guess, is basically, I know there's no national standard because there's no national police force, but there's some, like the President Obama's task force comes pretty close to that type of national recommendations. So it would be interesting to see if I would suggest that the task force point to some type of national standard or what's going on across the country and compare what Boston has been doing, how Boston compares now to what's going on out there and what's working and what's not working, from a not just an opinion thing, but like with data and accepted standards and metrics and so forth. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I also wanted to just highlight that the mayor's pledge was issued by the Obama's Foundation, My Brother's Keepers Alliance, which was a lot of the commitments that we're charged with engaging in now. So I just wanted to highlight that a lot of this is in response to some of the things that was made nationally known when President Obama was in office. Other comments, reactions, feedback, suggestions, things we should be thinking about, taking into consideration.
Cassie, you are unmuted if you just want to say what you wrote in the chat.
All right, I'll just say on that one. I mean, to me, we keep talking about the cameras separately from what they're useful for. One of the things is to avoid bias. So one of the things that was useful to see is like when bystanders are speaking or saying, you know, look, if the guy's in trouble, you can help him, or when Floyd himself is speaking, that's caught on camera. The officer's report wouldn't have included that. So it really matters to have the cameras recording things. Again, maybe always first for internal training, but then kept available if there's a later challenge so that we can get past bias.
Yep. Thank you, Cassie, for that. I also wanted to mention that right now there is, the administration is looking into current funding and its use on body cameras. So there is that discussion happening around the financial reality of technology. So wanted to just highlight that as well. Anyone else? Anybody on the phone? Don't forget, press *3 if you would like to come in and provide some feedback, suggestions, things we need to be thinking about, taking into consideration.
You are unmuted.
Somebody is unmuted. Claire?
Yes, hi. Okay, a couple more. I've been looking at the report and the policies. Is the full report on the pilot program available? It looks as though what I'm seeing on the website is just a summary. So that's just a question maybe the task force can let us know down, you know, as things go forward. And I do have a couple of other questions. Somebody mentioned that it was especially important for officers to wear body cameras in over-policed neighborhoods. And I think I live in a white neighborhood, and I think it's important here as well, because we know people of color get stopped in West Roxbury too. And so I'd put a strong vote in for them being worn everywhere in the city. The policies, the procedural thing from the police department talks about, or maybe it was the mayor's report, they had a lot of training, and that was super helpful. I would like to ask how often that training is repeated, because I'm sure it's not easy to get used to one, and probably refreshers are super helpful. And I'd like to know to what extent are results of body camera interactions used in training. What are the police learning from them about their interactions with citizens? And finally, I've noticed in the policies that when the officers are allowed to turn it off, and I think there's some sense to that. They talk about if it's in a religious, if they're, it's inside a house of worship, a locker room. There's could be some tricky things there. But one of my concerns is an officer turns it off, potentially with good reason, and then forgets to turn it back on. And how is it known when that sensitive place has been exited and the officer should be having it back on? I think that's all for me. Thanks.
Claire, as you was mentioning, I just wanted to do a follow-up question just for clarity purposes. When you mentioned that an officer forgets, right, that they might have been, because there is policy that says, as I highlighted, if an officer is engaging with another officer, their camera doesn't have to be on. But I'm saying if they just forget to turn it back on, should there be a disciplinary measure in place, or that's something that you're looking for us to explore in terms of what happens in this scenario?
Right. Was that a question to me, Darren?
I just wanted some more clarity, just to.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
to get some thought behind the question.
Right. I've been hearing the connection in the testimony today. I've been hearing the connection with the certification process that's being debated at the state level. I think there should be a record kept of when the officer is not turning it back on inappropriately. I don't know how you find out when, if he or she forgets to turn it back on, because you have to know, like, when did the incident end? But if they are not following the basic training procedures, I would hope there's some sort of a ding or demerit on their record. Personally, I think I would find it a real challenge to decertify a police officer solely on that ground. And I think that's that's a big challenge of the decertification process. How do you determine when an officer no longer should be serving the public in that role? Sorry, I don't have a good answer.
No. I just wanted you to just do what you just did, right? Like, just share some of the thoughts that went into the question you asked, because you have me now thinking about some of the things to bring back to the task force. So I was just trying to get you to expand on it. So you did great.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I see there's a hand up, FG.
Hi, thanks. So I just wanted to speak a little bit to the last speaker. I do think that it's important that there's some mechanism in place to kind of make sure that we are holding people accountable, not only officers accountable, and we're thinking proactively in regards to making sure that we're not just looking at body cam film and reviewing them when an incident, actually an investigation is actually required, but even potentially conducting random audits to make sure that we're weeding out the people that are randomly turning them off because they think we're not looking, or that are actually doing things that they're not supposed to, but someone isn't reporting them and it's not being escalated. So I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm not sure if auditing officers' body camera footage is a thing that people could potentially do, but I do think that there needs to be some way of proactively making sure that officers are actually doing their job effectively and upholding the law in the correct manner. But again, I don't know what that exactly looks like.
Thank you so much for that. I just want to highlight a couple of things that have been mentioned in the chat. Claire, to the report that you mentioned, I know that there will be an attempt by the city to figure out how to get that report posted. Want to highlight that I don't want to get your rank wrong, so I'll say Officer Eddie Crispin, because I don't know the rank off the top of my head. But also, can you introduce yourself, Officer Crispin? He is one of the members of the task force, and if you can actually give share your chat comment, because it does relate to one of the questions that was asked. So if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eddie Crispin. I'm a sergeant with the Boston Police Department. I think the question was how can we, I think just a basically track and audit whether or not officers are recording interactions appropriately. So you can track the calls that officers are dispatched to, and again, if I can track that you were dispatched to 50 calls over the last 3-4 days, and you don't have any body camera footage, that would be concerning. That would be an indication that you're not turning on your camera, even if you had 25. And as out of the 50 interactions, that would be an issue of concern. Generally, that's how they can track and audit whether or not cameras are being turned on appropriately.
Thank you so much for that, Sergeant Crispin. And also, again, Sergeant Crispin is a member of the task force as well. Just wanted to make sure that was emphasized. Any other comments?
I just want to make sure that Michelle Simos, who's had a couple of host chats, is able to speak.
Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
Fine, thank you. First of all, thank you for having this forum. I just found out about it today, and I apologize for arriving late. I also want to say that, you know, what I know about this issue is what I enforcement. I am just a public citizen. And yet at the same time, it seems that, you know, there are a couple of things. One is that it's a shame that we even need body cams, that the recruiting and hiring of police officers and the education of them isn't sufficient enough to weed out people who, you know, do not have open hearts and minds, and weed out people who have, you know, maybe issues with anger and violence. But knowing that that is not the case, I'm wondering if there is more technology that could be created, that sensors that could be used. Perhaps, I think someone turning off a body cam and a death resulting, automatically something needs to happen to that. That needs to be some kind of violation. And I understand they need to be turned off for certain situations. I'm not sure, you know, what those are. But I think there might be more technology that could, you know, like Siri and the voice recordings we use, we activate on our phones, where if there are more than 2 voices, then a recording goes on. If the police car stops and someone gets out, it goes on. So I'm thinking there may be some more technological solutions as well.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. Definitely, those are some of the things that are now jogging in my mind in regards to, you know, when and where and how, and, you know, all these type of questions to be answered. I think about some of the comments that were just shared around, you know, if there's no incident that takes place and the camera's off versus an incident that does take place and the camera is off, is there a violation? Like, what does the disciplinary measures look like that? So as you all are talking, these are the type of questions that I've been thinking about to bring back to the task force to try to get some clarity before we make the final recommendations, because I know that these will be the type of concerns that get brought up. When and where, what is issued as a violation? What does the disciplinary measure look like depending on said violation, right? Like, so all that's going to be taken into consideration and in regards to the final recommendation that comes out for reform. So thank you so much for the comments that you all have been given. I want to just highlight that Superintendent White said a report from the Boston Ward Camera Commander is generated each month showing which officers has not been turning on. Matter of fact, Superintendent White, do you want to just share your comment versus me reading it? Because
yes. So what we do is we have the body worn unit commander. They monitor which officers turn on and off their cameras. And like Sergeant Crispin stated, you can tell if they're not turning them on at calls, because we can match that up. sometime at the faint of heart, you know, in the moment, spirit of the moment, something happens, they jump out of the car right quick. We may understand that. But most of the time, we can do the audit to see if they are turning the camera on and off. There has been some action taken against officers that we believe have purposely turned off their camera. That, let me say alleged, because it's an internal affairs investigation, but there are actions that are taken if we believe they turned off the camera on purpose.
Thank you for that answer, Superintendent. Again, any other questions, comments, reactions to the conversation that we're having now, if anything stood out? Again, we are looking to get all and every information that the community wants to share so that we can take that into consideration with the recommendations that we're making. Far too often, we want to make sure that there's a transparent process, an engaging process. This is listening session 1, so we're learning while we're, we're flying the plane and building it at the same time. So hopefully we will get more interactive with the upcoming sessions. But again, all this has been healthy feedback for us to review internally.
This is Rick. I just wanted to say something real quick. I am very appreciative of the listening sessions, first of all, because it gives us a chance to hear the community's heartbeat on all of these issues before we even write a draft of the report. And I think I can speak for all the task force members in saying we all wanted to hear from the community first before we debated and took into consideration the things that we were going to recommend. So I appreciate that. The other piece of it is that this listening session is really important because of this last exchange, at least for me, because I'm thinking about the correlation of citizens' complaints against the police. Would they correlate to an officer who has been turning off his body cameras in those incidences where there's a complaint about his behavior? And then the second piece is around when we think about discipline, is there a difference between discipline of an officer who has been, ill-favored towards citizens in stops versus an officer who turns off his body cam during an officer-involved shooting? All of these considerations have come up in some way or another in this session, and it's extremely helpful for all of us who are a part of this. And so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone.
So we are going to unmute Catherine if you just want to make your comment public.
Catherine?
Catherine McCauley?
You're live. All right, we'll circle back. Maybe she's having technical difficulty. Can we get Claire Barker in? Can't hear that.
So, thank you. Sergeant Crispin, thank you so much for your input. That was really helpful. And I'm just a couple of follow-up questions. Can you, without giving away any personal details about officers, can you tell us the kind of discipline that would typically be enacted for someone who was violating the BWC policy? And then secondly, has that discipline changed for the better, the officer's use of body cameras?
Superintendent White, I think I can answer that question. So we always do the progressive discipline if it's the officer's first time. We'll take the incident into consideration. If a minor one, we do progressive, which sometime in any case of discipline will start out oral, written, and then it will go into action of suspensions, could be a day upwards. But it doesn't mean that we have to actually just take that step. We can jump over some steps depending on how egregious the action is. On this one here, it's still in the investigative process, so I can't comment on that at all. But I am hopeful that, like any other piece of equipment, the officers will use it professionally and under the guidelines that the department sets out.
I'm sitting here on mute, not just talking to myself, I see. So thank you again, Superintendent White, for the answer. Thank you all for the questions. Just wanted to highlight some of the things that have been raised in the chat. Cassie highlighted there should be some ongoing review and training, at least available, if not mandated, every 2 months to sit with a coach and review some of their interactions with the goal of learning how to improve skills. Elena highlighted that she asked the question, does the task force currently include any data scientists or people tasked specifically with data availability and accessibility? I'll just speak for myself. I'm not a professional data scientist, but I can say that there is a lot of individuals that are a part of this task force that deal with data pretty frequent and often. I don't know if that's the said title that they have as a data scientist, but we are definitely looking and reviewing as much data and as well as thinking about some of the companies that are hired to store data, review data, and get data out. So that is some of the tasks that we are exploring as the task force of just making sure that we have the right people analyzing the information that is being retrieved. Anybody else can clearly chime in from the task force subcommittee or just task force at large if they want to chime into that question. And I want to highlight that Sergeant Crispin also mentioned that it's important to note that policing can be a very fluid profession where things happen without a second notice. I just wanted to make sure the comments were read. But again, if there's any task force members that want to speak to the data scientists question that was asked, please feel free.
I can't say that I'm a data scientist, but I'm definitely one of the people who are very concerned with data and looking at it. And I'm definitely on the part of the task force that is handling data requests, myself along with Superintendent White, who has been in charge of getting most of the data that I've requested from the BPD, and there may be additional data that might come from the city of Boston directly. But yeah, I am one of those people on it. I don't have a degree in it, but it's been the bulk of my activism work for the past 20 years.
Elena, you're also unmuted if you want to add.
Yeah, no, just that as a, I don't know, data person, it just seems like a lot of these reports, like there's not an open like GitHub or anything like that, where we can dig into data or where anyone can see this data. I don't know. I think a lot about open science and reproducible code, and I don't see like literally anything of that. So some sort of a dashboard, a public GitHub, like with this data, anything along those lines, I think would be a good goal to really democratize and make available this data.
Thank you so much for that. I deal with a lot of political campaigns, so when you mentioned dashboard, I definitely get the sentiment of what that, how that could be so helpful to the public if it was available around some of the things that were.
Yeah, I mean, or even our Shiny apps or something. I mean, it doesn't have to be super well developed, but I think it's definitely something that should, democratizing it, making it open, making it explorable is something that I think should be seriously considered.
Thank you, thank you. And it looks like you have support for that from Chad. You said, could the dashboard be available on the BPD website? So again, these are the type of questions that we're gonna circle back and have. So right now, I want to pivot. This has been definitely helpful. If there isn't any last comments, I just want to make sure that we get some recommendations on how we can do this better. Like how, we have 3 listening sessions coming up. Is there any recommendations, any suggestions on how we can improve? I think there's always a room for improvement when we're talking about public service and doing a public service. So anybody have any recommendations, suggestions on how we should look at moving these conversations forward with the community, given we have a few sessions coming up in the very, very near short future? Stephen. You're off mute.
Okay. Is there a simple listserv or automatic email list that people can sign up without having to give their name and who they are, and just to get alerts about the the listening session tomorrow, and here's where the materials are ahead of time, and that way they can look through their email inbox and find, be more apt to see it for those of the, because not everybody's on Instagram and social media. So, but everybody's got email. So that's my suggestion. Plus having an interlude where there's a presentation, and if the materials can be made ahead of time, like you did today, or, things that people asked about, and then a short thing to just answer clarification questions that, like, do the cameras have blinking lights, or simple clarification, not expanding, but just Q&A on what's presented. And then people can comment, they'll be prepared, and maybe they won't say anything after something gets cleared up, so that would help, I think, the process.
Oh, thank you for that suggestion. Definitely taking every suggestion and feedback into consideration. We want this to be as user-friendly, engaging as possible. Again, we're flying the plane while building it. So please bear with us on some of the challenges. We're learning together and growing together. But that was definitely helpful feedback. I'm already in dialogue with the folks that put together and set up this call about some of the suggestions that you just mentioned.
Michelle, you will be unmuted, just so you can share your comment as well.
Yep, Michelle.
Oh, hi again. All I was thinking is, I'm the executive director of the Dignity Institute, and we always think about including youth. And I see that Jamal may fall into that category, but I don't see any female youth or youth who identify differently. So I just think it's important to include as many people as we can in the conversation.
Jamal Crawford is about to be a 50-year-old full-grown black man. I thank you. I know I look very good, but I'm a full-grown black man. Thank you.
I think I might be the youngest on this task force, now that I think about it. So yeah, I'm 38, so not in my 20s, but I think I am the youngest on the task force, unless someone disagrees. Any other comment, suggestions, feedback? Dina.
Jacob, we will be unmuting you.
Oh, Jacob first, and then Dina follow. Jacob. Jacob. Going once, twice. Let's transfer to Dina and see if Jacob comes back. We unmute Dina. Dina, you're live.
Yes, hi. I just had a quick question, sorry, from before. I know that there were mentions that there would be some scenarios where the police officers would have to turn off their camera, and I was just wondering, even if it can't be now, I know we're close to the end, if I guess if someone can provide a scenario or an example of when they would have to turn it off, because I guess in my mind I'm thinking that, I think someone had mentioned that the cameras should always be rolling, and that just in case there is an incident or, any type of injustice that occurs, and then the officer could say, oh, well, I had to turn it off because of such and such. And I just don't want there to be, situations where now that's, I guess, being used as an excuse to turn off the cameras. So I guess I don't know if anyone can provide any examples of why they would need to be turned off at any point in time.
So
Maybe just limit access of who can have, I guess, access to the footage, and maybe not make it public to everyone, but I don't know if anyone can provide any information.
Sure. So there's two ways this answer can be provided. One, if either the officer, Sergeant White, or Superintendent White or Sergeant Crispin wants to respond to that. One of the tasks that we are reviewing as a task force is exactly that question, though. When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? What type of circumstances, as Sergeant White alluded to earlier, if someone's responding to an incident that crosses their police cruiser, are they required to automatically hit a button, or is their camera already on while they're driving? These are the type of scenarios that I know have been brought to our attention as a task force of things are done in real time. So when does it be appropriate? I know there was language discussed around asking for the camera to go off. How does that work from the civilian or potentially the suspect in a situation? All these type of questions are questions that we're exploring, because we recognize the devil is in the details when it comes to this.
Darren, before either the superintendent or the sergeant respond, I just wanted to point out to the persons listening and participating here, the reason why we're asking is not because of our concerns as we deliberate as a task force, but I just want to point out that the ACLU has taken a different view with regards on the privacy question, that there are times when, one, if a citizen asks that the camera gets turned off, it must turn off. And I believe that's the policy that the Boston Police Department has now. And the other one is, I think there were issues around if there were children, identification of certain locations that are not related to the incident. So the discussion or the dilemma is those who say it stays on all the time, no matter what, and then the determination as to what remains on there has to be decided by somebody. But I can also see where those raise issues as well. So I would like folks to give us the best guidance as they can. Do they want it stay on all the time, and then someone makes a decision as to what may be expunged or taken out of the recording? Or should the decision as to whether it's on be made by the citizen himself or the officer or their supervisors at the time?
Superintendent White, thanks, Joseph. No, you stated it exactly. If we have privacy issues going into people's homes, I think they have a right to expectation of privacy. So I think for us to just keep the camera on and they want us to turn it off, I think that would be an issue. Some of the more important things would be, like you said, sexual assault victims, children, things of that nature. I think we have to be very respectful of those type of things. And there's 100 reasons why we could, but I think it has to be case by case basis and take the victim in consideration if that request was made. That's the short answer. Apologize.
Darren, you must be on mute again.
Gotta love this technology. All right, so and we're at the end of this hour, but I just believe we have time for one or two more suggestions or comments. I do want to respect everyone's time. We're approaching the 5 o'clock hour where this session will conclude. So I just want to make sure that if there's any more suggestions around how to suggestions to take into consideration as the flow of these listening sessions, if there's any more additional comments to that. And hearing none, seeing no hands. I just want to remind people that.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, there is a hand.
Yep. You hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So this was a question I had raised in the chat. Maybe you didn't get to see it, but and I think this is probably a good time for me to ask these two questions as we're approaching the end of the hour and the end of this listening session. How long has the task force been in existence? Also, that's one question. I also wanted to know how long did it take for policies such as Rule 405 to be enacted, and what's the typical turnaround time for policies that that we've been debating over these last couple of hours?
So let me see if I can answer some of those questions in the short. We've been convening and meeting for about a month now, once a week. Our task is what Mayor Walsh put out publicly, that he wanted to have something as it relates to reforms done within 90 days. Our first recommendation will come after these listening sessions, where we are looking to have a draft to him by mid-August, with hopefully something coming out publicly by mid-September. So that's looking like a turnaround time as it relates for what we're tasked with and charged with on this task force. Please, anyone from the task force, if I'm misquoted or if I missed something, please chime in. But that's how that's when we started, how we're meeting, and when we're expected to have some recommendations before the mayor.
Okay, thank you again.
No problem. So again, no other callers, no hands? Cool, hearing none. Again, I want to just remind people that please submit any comments, suggestions, feedback, not only to this issue, but to the flow of this listening session to bpdtaskforce@boston.gov, so that we can ensure this format works best for the community. Your questions, your thoughts, and feedback are key to this whole process. So written comments can be submitted up till August 7th. And we have 3 more listening sessions. Tomorrow's topic is focused on implicit bias and police review, the police review board and co-op board. And finally, the use of force policies. Please learn more by visiting boston.gov/endings-racism. Want to again thank the task force member, the subcommittee task force members, and especially you as the community for providing us feedback and comments and suggestions around what we should be looking at and considering as we're making recommendations around reforms to police.
Thank you. You did a great job. I appreciate it.
No problem. If there's anything, Allison, you want to say anything? Reverend Brown was also instrumental in putting this all together. So Allison or Reverend Brown, any final words to leave the community with?
I just thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come and participate, and your comments, your thoughts, your questions. They're all very valuable, a very valuable resource to us in the work that we have to do. So I thank you.
Thank you all as well. God bless.
Yeah, before y'all quit, because I do got 2 minutes and I like the 5 o'clock stickler of a time. Cassie had one final remark as well as Chad. So I'm giving y'all 45 seconds apiece to make sure that we end at 5 o'clock. Cassie? Unmute Cassie, please.
Just 1 second.
Yep. Cassie, you're live.
I'm sorry, there's a technical question. I can see on my chat that I can send to panelists, but I can't send it to all participants. So I don't see anybody else's comments, only a few. Is there some way?
I think that was just limited. And again, I'm not the tech savvy person that's navigating this, but I don't know if it was set to block so people weren't engaged in back and forth on the chat that the everyone would have opportunities to see.
Well, it's been very fine as it was, but I just wondered. Okay, thank you.
No problem. And Chad, last comment. Chad,
Again, that's just, yep. Okay, that's just me again forgetting to take my hand down.
Well, don't worry about it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It is 5 o'clock on the hour. I'm quite sure others like me have other things that we have to go run and do. So thank you again, and see y'all soon.